Yes, yeah.
Okay, welcome everyone to the semi-finals round. Before we start, I just want to ask both teams to put down opposition already did it. So, government, please drop your speaker orders, just as opposition did in the chat, and also indicate who will be doing the reply speech. Thank you. Then we'll start right away. Okay, so now we have Gov speaking order. Just a reminder, POIs, please state your POI preference at the start of your speech so speakers know which way they would like to be addressed. Without further ado, on the motion of um, legally binding manifestos, I call upon the Prime Minister to commence the debate here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
All right. So I'll be starting my speech in three, two, one. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the longest time, political parties have been elected but has gotten away from not fulfilling their manifestos and getting away with just doing whatever they want and not giving back to the people. I think it's time for a change. It's time for the government side to start a revolution to stop these people from betraying the people and legally bind their manifestos. Okay, so what I'm going to do as the Prime Minister of this debate is firstly, I'm going to define or characterize the motion for this debate and explain to you what our policy in order to make it mandatory for them to fulfill their manifestos, and thirdly explain our team objective, and lastly give several arguments. The first argument that is coming from our side is how punishment justified in order to, is justified for breaking those manifestos, and the second argument given by the side by my DPM is how it's going to create a better world and create a healthier, cleaner political sphere. And lastly, my third speaker will deconstruct the case coming from the opposition side and show to the House why our side wins this debate. So now let's move on to my first task, characterization. So first of all, what is a manifesto? Manifesto are promises and guarantees given by political parties to gain the trust and confidence of the voters. So we think that in order to mandate these manifestos, mandate all political parties to have a legally binding manifestos. Firstly, you need to have a very specific manifestos. The manifestos has to be very specific in a sense where you have a metric to measure whether it is successful or not. As in, you need to have a very clear goal of you want to increase the GDP by a certain percent, or you want to lower the minimum wage by a certain value. It has to be very specific, and then it has to be fulfilled before the term ends. As in, like when after an election you have a 5-year term to fulfill your manifesto, and if you fail to do so, and then the punishment will come after your term has ended. So I think that in order to punish these political parties, you need an external body to manage and evaluate these manifestos, because these manifestos cannot be passed easily. It has to go through a very it has to go through a body to make sure that these manifesto are something that is not ridiculous and that is something that can be measured, or like can be punished by crime. Okay, so that's how done with the characterization. Now let's move on to the problem in the current status quo. So right now in the current status quo, parties that are elected have no legal repercussions even if they fail to fulfill their manifesto, even if they break the voters' trust and like they break the people's trust towards the government. These parties can get away with it easily. These parties use manipulative approaches and sweet talks to obtain these votes, and we think that is very wrong for these ministers to get away with it. We think that they are incompetent at their job and they should be punished by crime. So now, what's our policy for this debate? So we think that in order to punish these ministers, we need to have how I've said just now, we need to have a body to measure and reevaluate whatever their crime. So meaning that if their manifestos given by them is very large and then they fail to fulfill it, then the punishment will be larger. It will be proportionate to the manifestos that they have broken. So we think that these ministers are convicted and will serve jail time. So if even if they fail serve jail time, they are still able to run for office even after their sentence has ended. So now let's move on to my arguments. So firstly, why is breaking a
Please.
punishable by crime? But before that, sure.
You said that by even though they have already served jail time, they will still be able to run for the government. And correct? I was under
Yes.
the assumption that those without without any criminal charges can only those people can run for government. If I'm not mistaken, will you please clarify?
I think like the main goal of this debate is to punish these people who fail to fulfill their manifestos. But the thing is, it doesn't say anything about not allowing them to have a chance of redemption later on in the future. But as we all know, if you have a bad track record, you are less likely to have your votes. You have the people to vote for you. Therefore, it's going to create a world where people are the ministers are constantly trying to fulfill their manifestos and trying to create a better government at the end of the day. Okay, so now continuing to my arguments. So why is breaking a manifesto something that is justified to be punished by crime? So we think that parties have an obligation to pay back to the people. How does this look like? So we think that the votes by the people have a very large value towards these ministers. For example, if you get votes by the people, then you gain political power, you gain the power to decide for the country, you gain wealth, you gain position. So these things have a very concrete value, meaning that the votes by the people have a very concrete value towards in an election. Therefore, what the ministers have to do is they have a legal obligation to pay back these people, meaning that they have to pay back the votes that they got from the voters by fulfilling the manifestos and giving the people their services. So we think that this is sort of, looks like a trade where these ministers would trade their services in turn for the voters' vote. So we think that when they fail to fulfill their end of the bargain, this is something that is punishable by crime. So the state have an obligation to protect the rights of the people. So we think that when these ministers fail to fulfill their obligation, they are betraying the rights of the people, and we think that is justified for the for our side to punish these ministers at court. So we think that this is the best interest of people. But secondly, we also think that the benefits that these ministers gain when are in office is something that is proportionate to crime. Meaning that when they are in office, they gain a lot of benefits. They gain wealth, they gain a large responsibility, they gain power, and these things come from the people. They come from taxation, they come from these people votes, these people's trust and agreement. So when they fail to fulfill their manifestos, they are directly betraying the people and betraying the nation themselves. So we think that when they do these sort of things, they should be held accountable, and they should be there should be legal repercussions in order to stop this from going on and creating a worse government in the end of the day. So we think that in order to cater towards this problem, legally binding their manifestos would create a change and making them realize that they have a responsibility that they have to fulfill, and they would be held accountable if they fail to do so. So this would create a better government and create a better world for a country as a whole. So if you want to create a better government, a better political party, and a cleaner political sphere, go with the government side. Never been prouder to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for that speech. I now call upon the Leader of Opposition to continue the debate.
Okay, before I start, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right. Okay, let's move on. Okay. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to the government, to my fellow oppositions, to the brilliant educators, and to the punctual timekeepers. I, as the lead government, as the lead opposition, Muhammad Ifan bin Ahmad Ramizu, I will I will explain my points for today, and followed by my deputy opposition, Amalina. She will continue to explain her points, and my whip opposition will wrap it up and fix all of the government's mistakes. Okay. Under the motion, this House will mandate all political parties participating in an election to have a legally binding manifesto. We, as the OP, we believe that not only legally binding manifesto, but we believe that all political parties participating should have all legally binding manifestos. Okay, moving on to the status quo. Not all manifestos carried out not all manifestos are carried out, and citizens will eventually get mad. Okay. For our counter mechanism, okay, we as the op, we believe that we should do all. Um, we should make the political parties that participating have compulsory to do all to fulfill all their binding manifestos legally. Okay, and our second counter mechanism is that if the political parties cannot fulfill their manifestos, the national judiciary will take action will take action on the problems. Okay. Moving on. Okay, moving on to my rebuttals for the Mr. Prime Minister. Okay. Okay, Mr. Prime Minister, you have stated that when my deputy opposition asked that if people that went to jail can still run for the election, and you say that they still can, but why? Why do you want to take on people that have a criminal record in the background? Will that make the citizens feel like it is worth it to vote for that? It is worth it for that person to run for our country? Is it worth it for that person to lead our country? Because criminal records will make assumptions for the citizens to feel like, why do we need that person leading our country? Because of their criminal background. Okay, moving on to the burden of proof that we want to specify for today. Okay, the first burden of proof that we want to specify for today is that we want to prove that every action has its own consequences. And the second burden of proof that we want to prove that citizens deserve security. Okay, and the burden of proof that we want the government to prove is that we want you to prove that how you guys will ensure the citizen satisfaction through having a legally binding manifesto. Okay. Moving on to my points, moving on to the argument from the burden of proof, which is we want to prove that citizens deserve security. Okay. What is meant by security? What we meant by security here is the feeling of satisfaction when the citizens voted for the parties that they want to lead the country. We want them to feel satisfied as the political parties that has been elected to fulfill all their legally binding manifestos. Okay. Second, we want the citizens feeling of safety is to be guaranteed when they are as they are living in this country. We want them to feel guaranteed of safety. Okay. Okay. Moving on. And we do not want the citizens to feel not represented by their parties since they have voted for the political parties that they want that they want for them to lead the country. For example, you promise that you will do only one, but you make other manifestos that are more important, that convince the citizens more, but you don't do that. What is the point? Will the citizens feel satisfied? No. That's why we want to make all we want to mandate all the legally binding manifestos. We want the political parties. It is compulsory for them to fulfill all the binding manifestos. Okay. If the if the political parties don't fulfill uh, fulfill the binding manifestos, for example, they fulfill only one. We don't want extreme protests to happen as the promises made are not fulfilled. Okay. Next, the citizens deserve honesty for being the one to choose to elect for their leader. We want them to deserve honesty. We want them to feel like what they have voted is worth. Okay. Because of the citizens voted for whom they want to lead our country, they truly deserve all honesty and promises, and all the manifestos should be done by the parties. Okay. To wrap up my presentation, there is a quote from Uncle Ben from Spider-Man. He once said before he died, he once said, "With great power comes great responsibility," and under the stance that all political parties should fulfill all their binding manifesto, I, Muhammad Ifan, as the leading opposition, I rest my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition, for that speech. I now call upon the Deputy Prime Minister for theirs. Here.
Before I start, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Good morning. I would like to bid to the panel of educators and members of the hall. Today, once again, the opposition side has proved that they're basically running the government's case. The opposition side has basically said that they want all manifestos to be legally binding, and this in case they in this case they misunderstood the whole motion, and they're not supposed to support the motion. Instead, they are supposed to go against and say that the manifestos should not be legally binding. It makes their argument from the get-go irrelevant, and essentially if their argument is taken into consideration, they are basically running the government's show. Now, I will move on to my rebuttals. So, the leader of opposition has once again proven that he wasn't listening when my prime minister clearly said that election candidates that have been criminalized because of their failure in upholding their manifesto in the last term to run against government, that these leaders will have a track record, and for sure that the people will know that these leaders or these candidates are I'm sorry. These candidates will be running again in the next election. But the people will of course know that their track record shows that they have not upheld their manifestos in their last terms. The leader of opposition also wasn't clearly listening when my prime minister has clearly said that government the government will make sure that there's an external body to ensure that the manifestos that is put out is feasible, and that they will reevaluate their manifestos, and that punishment should be proportionate to the manifestos that they have put out during the election. So clearly, what the opposition is saying right now is that they are completely disregarding my prime minister's arguments and instead only focusing on their points, which only furthermore supports our case. Now I'll move on to my arguments. I'll say that this motion, this where this house will mandate all political parties participating in the election to have a legally binding manifesto, it will make a good and competent government. Why? I'll tell you now. A legally binding manifesto will have will make the government able to carry out their manifestos. The election party won't give out unfeasible manifestos, like for example 100 manifestos that they could not fulfill, and this in turn will make the people trust the government more, because they know that the government or the election party that will be elected into the government would of course fulfill their election if they fulfill their manifesto if they want to participate in the next election. And on the opposition side, they would have their government not having a legally binding manifestos, which would then create distrust and ruin the party's image and so forth. And this is because what the opposition side wants to put out is that they want a country where their government wouldn't have a legally binding manifestos, and they want to make as if that the people does not have the right. They want to disregard completely the rights of the people, and this is what on our side of the government we want our parties to have a legally binding manifesto, so that the people would have increased job possibilities, and a legal manifestos could also ensure that the public we could enhance public transportation, we could increase social welfare, we can provide internet access for education and so forth. And if we want our country to flourish, then we have to push this motion ahead, where the government would have a legally binding manifesto. So now I'll go on why our side will work. So if the government or the majority party in the cabinet fail to uphold their manifesto, then at the end of their term, there will be a track record that shows their incompetency during their time as the government. And so even if the election party, I will go on to rehash what my prime minister said, even if the election party were to run again in the next election, it will be hard for them to garner support from the people. And this in case will make a competent government, because we know that this election party would then instead uphold all their manifestos instead of what happening on the opposition side. So the opposition side is basically giving a free way, or giving an option, an easy way out for the government on their side to opt out of upholding their manifesto, and this in turn will make a country that is chaos. Whereas on our side of the government, where we would like to mandate that all political parties participating in the election to have legally binding manifestos, we would create a cleaner and a better political sphere. And this is what we will be pushing. This is what the government side will be pushing today. So the government that is scared to break the manifesto, they will of course do their best to improve the country. So if per se the government they want to, if the election party that is currently holding the majority place in the cabinet, if they want to run for the next election, they will of course will try to uphold the manifesto, and so that they wouldn't have a track record, and so that they could garner the support of people when they are running for the next election. So with that, I'd like to say that if you want a better government, then you would side for our side, because in our side, our government would create a better and more progressive society as whole. So with that, I have never been prouder to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, DPM, for that speech. I now call upon Deputy Leader of Opposition to continue the debate. Here.
if I got 50 cents for each time my friend forgot to do something that they promised for me, I would be rich by now. Before that, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning I bid to the educators, timekeeper, fellow opponents, and of course my allies and members of the hall. Today, I, as the second speaker, will be rebutting the points given by the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister, and also give my point under the key phrase is of think before you lead. And before that, let's go on to the rebuttals. As my Prime Minister has spoken, but before that, I would like to re-clarify what the government has seemed to be so assumptive about us. We are saying that we want to legally bind all manifestos, whereas in the motion itself stated that political parties will have a legally binding manifesto. They forgot to take on that simple part of detail. While the word might seem small, but that means one. One legally binding manifesto is simply not enough. Whereas on our side, we are fighting for all legally binding manifestos. Because on both sides are currently fighting for a better government. We are currently fighting for a government that serves the citizens in a much better way. But our way is much better, and you will see in my speech today. First of all, in the Prime Minister's speech, he said that those ministers who have served jail time will have a track record, but they will still be able to run and in the elections. Ladies and gentlemen, while it may seem that they have a low sort of possibility, we must remember the power of words, the power of social media, the power of what the society sees. Ladies and as we know, although there are all sorts of cases surrounding the ministers and many other high-profile people, we have to take note of their social medias. There are people who are posting something that may seem opposing, but at the same time can actually garner respect or garner sympathy. Our citizens are sympathetic. They want the best. They want the best for everyone if they want to, but they are also sympathetic to people. And they are humans. Humans are either easily comforted or easily persuaded by certain things as well. The power of words is not to be underestimated, and we think that the government side are underestimating that power of word itself. And they also said that they will provide an external body to evaluate the manifesto carried out by the government. But ladies and gentlemen, we have to take note too of the current situation of our government, of our country itself. Do we have the sources to actually build a new external body in the first place to evaluate that as well? And how will we make sure that that body will be fully non-biased towards the government? How can we be sure that there is no corruption in that third body itself? However, while we on the opponent side are actually have decided to take the national judiciary as the one who will take out the trial, who will carry out the trial after the term ends, so that will be feasible. If the manifesto is not taken care of in the first, then the jury will take on actions, and it will decide on what sort of action should be take place in the first place according to the crimes I'm seeing. So we can see, while on their side, they are fully just taking on saying that you will go to jail. While on our side, there is a chance of trial. And after that trial, if there is a track record, they can never run for the elections. That ensures that people who have betrayed the trust in the first place will run for government again. We are making sure that those who have betrayed such a giant responsibility given to them, they have betrayed that, they will never do that again. That is unforgivable. Are you trying to forgive? If someone betraying a whole nation, are you trying to forgive that person? Government, please answer that if you could. Now, before that, I should really go on to my point, which is think before you lead. It is undeniable that there are times where humans itself they either forget the promises or decide not to do it for their own reasons as well. And also. And by having all legally binding manifestos on our side, we are making sure every political party will think thoroughly about the budget, about how much things they will have to take on in the manifesto in order for it to work. While yes, the second speaker of the government have taken the same point, but ladies and gentlemen, take note, they are only legally binding one manifesto. We are legally binding all manifestos. and we have a much tighter security, making sure that those who have betrayed our trust will never be betraying us again. We will ensure there is no form of deception in the current or in the future government. And no matter how small, no matter how small the deception is, we will reduce corruption and in our eyes, because the government itself, they are being not only seen and observed by other parties, but they will also be observed by the citizens itself. We as citizens have chosen them, and we will judge them if we see that they didn't carry out the manifesto at all. Then criminal charges can be taken place, and the trial will be done no matter what. And also from the Prime Minister, from my leader of opposition, he has been saying how the citizens will get the security, will get the insurance that they deserve. Citizens, and so we chose our leaders, and we will get the benefits no matter what, because we legally bind them. It is a guarantee. While on the government side is no guarantee for they only legalize one. We legalize all. We have a we take full responsibility for all manifestos on our side. While on their side, there's only one, and not only that, they are allowing criminals to run for election in the future. Do you want that for our future? I hope the adjudicators today will see the direct difference between the government side and the opposition side. With that, I am never prouder to oppose this motion. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader of Opposition, for that speech. I now call upon Government Whip to continue the debate. Here.
Assalamualaikum and good morning to all members of the floor. Today, I would like to tell you how our side government has already won the debate from the get-go. So first of all, side opposition had totally misunderstood the spirit of the motion. Even if their arguments are taken into consideration, they would be essentially running government's case. So let me tell you why we on side government won today's debate. So first of all, side opposition failed to characterize their burden of proof. They failed to elaborate on their burden of proof. And they failed to provide a plan B, which they touched and go for their counter mechanism. They said that the political they did not elaborate much on their counter mechanism. And thirdly, they failed to see and understand their role as opposition in today's debate. So first of all, I want to clarify what they had to do in today's debate. So in today's debate, what they had to do were, first of all, prove how it is not justified to punish the government for not carrying out their manifestos, and second of all, prove how it is not so dire, to mandate to propose a legally binding manifesto. So those were the two things they had to prove to us today. So moving on to my rebuttals, this DLO said that they side opposition kept on emphasizing on bad track records. Bad track records should not run for office. But then let me tell you this, that is not the main point of the debate today. The main point of today's debate is mandating all political parties participating in an election to have a legally binding manifesto. So first of all, if we were to say that these people who has bad track record, if they can still do their job, it's fine. They can still run for office, meaning that if they can still do their job, so they may have, after being trialed or sentenced, they may have a change in attitude, and they are more incentivized. They have more motivation to redeem themselves. For example, in Malaysia, this case, there are cases where ministers who have been trialed and sentenced serve jail time, and they still are able to run for office, and they still can do their job well. So that's moving on, not spending too much time on that. Moving on to my clashes. So my clashes today, there are two clashes today. So the clashes today in today's debate would be, first of all, which side better caters to the nation's best interest in mind, and second of all, which side promotes a healthier and cleaner, more transparent political sphere. So first of all, side opposition felt Said opposition failed to realize the things that they should have done today. They did not really engage with our argument on how we ensure more transparency exists better on our side. That's first of all. And first of all, if we were to talk about which side better caters to the nation's best interests in mind, of course, it's government side, because first of all, we're mandating legally binding manifestos, and second, we ensure that the manifestos that could be passed on and that could be shared to public are actually feasible, they are within term. We on site government had already explained how we would carry out the election process, how we ensure that the citizens will not be deceived, the citizens will not be betrayed, and side opposition failed to do so too. Like the manifestos, what if the politicians come up with ridiculous manifestos on their side? They did not tell us how they reduced that problem. Okay, so second of all, on our side, we take into consideration all stakeholders, including the ministers that are being what you call it, that are being punished. So it is past time to rethink the legal position of election manifestos in order to safeguard voters' rights and interests in the country. If we want our country or the nation to flourish and become a good example of democracy, we need a new set of norms. And by making election manifestos legally enforceable, the courts will need to come up with new interpretations of their legal standing. So in this case today, we had won the first clash, and this clash will be intertwined with our second clash, would be which side promotes a healthier and cleaner, more transparent political sphere. And my PM and DPM had already continuously and repeatedly tell you why our side government is better and why we won today. So in most cases, voters will choose the candidate or political party with the best manifesto. So there is a consideration between the political party and the citizens themselves, the votes themselves. It's their votes are valuable, and they're voting for their political parties which they think do would serve them back. So it's like a value exchange. And when these political parties fail to carry out their manifesto, their promises to us, the citizen, this gives rise to unsatisfaction. This makes them feel betrayed, so on and so forth. So my my DPM had already explained which how our side actually promotes a more transparent and healthier, cleaner, and more competent government on our side. And I had already explained how on side opposition is essentially running government's case from the get-go. There wasn't much to talk about, and they kept on touching on bad track records. Bad track records. That was the only thing they caught from our arguments today. So in conclusion, if you want a government that's more transparent, that's aware, and that's more responsible and competent, please side with side government. With that, I'm never prouder to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Gowan, with that speech. I now invite the opposition with here.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right. Um, I will begin in one, two, three. All right. Okay. A very good morning. I bid to the honorable judges, the punctual timekeepers, my teammate on the opposition side, and those on the government side. I will divide my speech into clarifying those that needed to be clarified, my rebuttals, and also clashes, and lastly will be reaffirming my teammates' points and also my stance. Firstly, I will begin with clarification. Um, as the whip for the opposition side, I would say that we on the opposition side have proven our burden of proof, which is every action has its own consequences, and we have also proven that citizens deserve security. Um, Firstly, I would say that the government side is not understanding the motion that they are legalizing only a manifesto. However, on the opposition side, we are legalizing all of the manifesto. All right. And other than that, the government side also did not answer my second speaker's question, which is how will they prevent corruption in the third body for evaluating this manifesto? All right, without wasting any time, I will go straight into my rebuttal. Um, Firstly, the government side first speaker did say that there political parties that did not
POI, sir?
did not let me finish. I will take it later. The government side of first speaker did not will allow these political parties who did not carry out their manifesto to be put in jail, because why should no, no, no. The first speaker of the government side said that those political parties that did not carry out their manifesto will be put in jail, but they can still go for election. And my question is, why should we let them, those who have betrayed the citizen trust, to have a second chance? Do you think they deserve a second chance? I assure you that if we give them a second chance to go and run in election, even though they will have less support, I will assure you that power of word is the power of word is um, the power of word cannot be underestimated. And if we allow these political parties to continue making manifestos in an election, I am sure that they will continue to keep making empty promises and get away with their manifesto if they are only supposed to carry out only a manifesto. Um, Next, since the government side only legalized only one manifesto, but the opposition side is only legalizing all manifesto, we do not want to carry. We are doing this because we do not want to allow any form of deception, because we want this political party to always be honest with the society when they are making these promises in the manifesto. We do not want to hear any empty promises from the government if they can only carry out one out of all the manifesto. I will take it later. All right. Now I'll move to the clashes. Okay. Since the government side is supposed to agree with the motion that legalizing only a manifesto, this shows that the government side is letting these political parties to get away with their promises during the manifesto because they are to supposed to what's the word supposed to carry out only one of their promises. However, on the opposition side, we are making sure all these promises to be fulfilled. Okay, our side, we do not want any of these political parties to get away with their manifesto. We want these political parties to take responsibility for each of their action and each of their word. And then I will reaffirm that the citizen, as my first speaker has said, that citizen deserves security. And if these political parties have been chosen by the citizen, why the citizen should not deserve the honesty of the governing body? Okay, and my second speaker did say that we should think uh, before taking action. It is true that every action comes with consequences, and my speaker did again re-emphasize this that with great power always comes great responsibility, and we cannot deny this. And before I end my speech, I will state my stand that I have never been prouder to oppose the motion that this House will mandate all political parties participating in an election to have a legally binding manifesto. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Obwit, for that speech, and I'll call upon opposition reply.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good day. Once again, I bid to the educators as fellow members of the hall. Welcome back to the reply speech of this debate today. Now, for my reply speech, I will be emphasizing the direct difference of the consequences and the implications of the government and the opposition side. Firstly, on the government, they, as said in the motion that is repeated a lot of times in this debate. This House mandates all political parties to participate in an election to have a legally binding manifesto. The government should take note of that, and they did, but they did not take note of our stance, which we will mandate all manifestos that is proposed in the elections in the first place. So you can see whether you want all your promises to be fulfilled, or simply one promise is to be fulfilled. Which one would you choose? I personally would choose all. I'm pretty sure everyone would want all of their promises to be fulfilled in the first place. And secondly, in terms of the body that is going to evaluate the manifesto, whether it is carried out or not. The government said that they will do a third body. On our side, we decided to take on the national judiciary as our jury itself. On their side, do we have the funds? Do we have the resources to find the people to be part of that third body itself? Well, on our side, national judiciary is not even under parties, so they are really non-biased. And thirdly, in their mechanism, they said that they will serve jail time if they did not carry out the manifesto and can still run again in the elections. While on our side, we said we will have a fair trial to ensure that the manifesto is carried out or not, fairly or not. And they can never run for elections again. If you were a parent, would you rather let your mate a second chance and to take care of your baby even after she accidentally dropped him downstairs? I would never do that to my own brother. Nevertheless, my own child. Would you? We want another person, a person who has betrayed our trust, the trust of the whole nation, to run again. Not even chance should be given to them. And secondly, they have misjudged the power of words. The power of words is never to be underestimated, as I've said before in my speech, and my third minister have said before. There are news, there are social medias, there are people who can spread the influence all over the world. While on our side there is not a chance, they can never run for again. No sort of persuasion can even ensure that they will run again. We are ensuring the safety from people who are not taking their promises seriously. And so at the end of the day, which side of the government, between the government and the opposition, fulfills the best and competent government? The government side, they say their party will only mandate a legally binding manifesto. On our side, we are legally binding all manifestos, which is much better. And what about the citizens? On their side, citizens still have a chance to be persuaded by the power of words, by the power of the media, by the power of the news. On the people who have a track record. Because people are sympathetic, as I have said before. The power of words is never to be underestimated, and they are underestimating the power of words, which they are even still using now. Are they underestimating themselves? Well, on our side, no, we are not underestimating that, and we are cutting down the chances for corruption itself. And we are, on our side, our citizens are happy with no chance of even corruption, no chance of no manifestos not being carried out. With that, as last speaker, fully oppose this motion. This House mandates all political parties in elections to have all legally binding manifestos. With that, I thank you.
Thank you. I'll reply for that speech, and I'll call upon the government reply to end the debate for today. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think even from the get-go, the opposition side has failed to understand the spirit of the motion. So I think that even from the start, we have already won this debate. And I'm going to prove to you in this speech how we won. So in my speech today, I will prove to the House I will tell the House what both sides are supposed to do, the burden of proof that was supposed to be proven by both sides, and what both sides give into this debate. So firstly, on the opposition side, they failed to understand the spirit of the motion. What they're supposed to prove is that how their manifestos shouldn't be legally bonded to parties. How like parties can just have manifestos and they don't have a legal requirement for them to fulfill. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to run as like how the status quo is. But what they did was they ran a parallel case, just manipulating grammatical words in the motions, just changing a legally binding manifesto into they want to legally bind all manifestos. I think that's the same thing that what we ran, and they failed to understand the motion. But secondly, there were lack of contention from opposition. They didn't contest any of the arguments given by the government side, how we already proved to the House why it's punishable by crime for failing to fulfill a manifesto, and how it's going to create a better world, it's going to give a positive outcome, and so on. There were no contention from the opposition side. They simply conveniently manipulated the motion into whatever their understanding is, and I think they failed to understand this debate as a whole. So on the government side, however, what we did was we proved to the House why by failing to fulfill a manifesto is something that is punishable by crime. It is an action that is punishable by crime, and they should be convicted. We proved to the House how they have a legal obligation to fulfill the needs and of the people, and how by not fulfilling the manifesto, they are directly betraying the nation and the people themselves. So we think that it is justified for us to punish these ministers who fail to fulfill the manifestos, as well as how we prove to the House is going to give positive outcome, how it's going to create a better, healthier political party, a political sphere, is going to create a better government because of the fear of getting punished for not fulfilling their promises, and then it's going to create a better government that is going to work as hard as possible to create a better country for the people and create a more competent ministers who can lead the country to create a better future. So on our side, protect the votes of these people, we protect the rights of the people, we create a world where these ministers have an obligation to fulfill their they fulfill their obligation to provide back to the people, given that they have the power to do so, and they have been given the benefits of becoming ministers and been given the power to control to rule the nation. So we think that all in all, what this debate clearly shows that how we from the government side has clearly proven to the house why this motion should be accepted, and how it's going to create a better world in the end of the day. The opposition side simply supported the government side by running a case saying that all these manifesto should have been legally bonded anyways, and they were agreeing from our side, even from the first speech all throughout the three speakers. So we think that in order to come to a conclusion, we have to go with the government side, and we have won this debate. With that, I end my speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Gov Reply, for that speech. So now I think you guys just go back to the main hall where the results will be announced in a bit. I have to deliberate with my other panelists. So see you